Cocroft, your Get Your Life coach, and I am here to finally do a video about boundaries. So, if you've been watching my last couple of videos, I've been saying that I really need to do a video about boundaries because it kept coming up every time I was talking about all these different topics. And so today is my video about boundaries. If you are a woman that is a leader in their organization or a leader of your own organization, you're an entrepreneur, maybe you work a 9 to 5 and you have your own business, or you have your own business, just that, or you work full time. Either way, I find that I have been all three of those people. I have just had a job where I was working that. I've also, for most of my life, had a job as well as another business. And then right now in my life, I have my business. And so I've been all three of those things and have played all those roles. And one thing that I can say without a shadow of a doubt is that boundaries was so key and are so key in allowing me to feel content more times than not while I am going through this journey, building my business, becoming a better leader, and all the things. And here's the thing: most times we think that people are supposed to know our boundaries. So that's one piece. Sometimes we have these boundaries in our head that we expect other people to know. And then we get dissatisfied with how people are treating us or how situations are occurring in our life. And we wonder, why aren't people just reading our minds or assuming that we would want this instead of what is actually happening? So that ends up happening a lot because of, I would say, our fear of hurting people's feelings. Or if you're anything like me, I am a recovering people pleaser. And so having to be real about the fact that sometimes I'm afraid, or I have been afraid of saying things to people without hurting their feelings, about not saying things in a tactful way, and wanting people to know that, hey, I still care about you, but I still get to have a boundary. And so I think that if that is something that you're seeing, is that you're getting frustrated with how things are going at work or with your team, or you're frustrated with things in your business, and maybe you just feel like, people aren't reading the room. But at the end of the day, have you given people a real boundary, a real clear boundary that they could follow, and that you give them the opportunity to start having new behaviors? And so in this video, I want to talk a little bit about, what are some great ways to identify if you need a boundary. And then I want you to also just have a few steps that you can take to create and articulate your boundaries. So I hope you're ready. I have some notes because I didn't want to forget what I was going to say. And so I talk a lot about really having your best life, and that includes not just your personal life, but it includes every part of your life. So the way that you lead at work, the way that you lead your business, and all the things that, are encompassed in what we do in our lives. So I really desire to see people live their fullest potential in their life, and specifically women, because I've been doing so much work with women over the years. And so I say all that to say this is something that's critical. If you, whether you're having an issue in your personal life, whether you have an issue when it comes to your career or at work or in business, I would go on to say that it'd be interesting for you to be able to identify, is it a boundary issue? And I felt like these are some ways that you can know if it's a boundary issue. One way is if you have a hard time saying no. So perhaps you're in a situation, whether it's personal, work, or in your business, where you're saying yes all the time to people. You're saying yes to engagements. You're saying yes to you're saying yes in your behavior. So maybe you're not saying yes because someone asked you to do something, but you're saying yes without even being asked. Your behavior is always yes, or to serve other people without question. And so that's, in the sense, not saying no. And so if you find that you are constantly doing things for other people, and it's become in such a way that it's automatic, they just expect it, and now you're resenting it, if you start feeling that, or if you feel like you are having hesitations with telling people no. So it could be telling your higher ups no, in terms of how you may not, desire to show up to meetings that are after 5 o'clock. Or if it's not saying no to, maybe you have some people on your team and they're used to you taking care of something, but you've only been doing it because you wanted to help maybe get them on board or help them transition from, one program to another, and now it's time to release the chains and you haven't. Or if you're in your business and you're working with contractors, and maybe you have a contractor that you really like, and I've been here, you have a contractor that you really like, but you find that there are still some things in the way that they do business that are just not working with how you want to do business, but you've been saying yes to them every time they come back to the table because you really like them, but the way that they're doing things really isn't the best for your business. If you're finding yourself in those spaces, it might be time for you to create some boundaries. Another one is if you find yourself overwhelmed. Maybe you have too many things on your to do list. You find that everything that is supposed to be done in a day, it's way too much. Like you've already put way too much on your list and it's not really something that you even have the capacity to do. So you're finding yourself overwhelmed. You're finding yourself overworked. It doesn't feel like there's this even exchange. Or even in your relationships, maybe you're overwhelmed because you're the one that's doing all the initiating. Everything that happens in your family is because you have done it, right? And so this might be a key indicator that there are some boundaries that need to be in place. Another thing is if you're afraid to hurt people's feelings. So that's really similar to not saying no often. Excuse me. But if you are finding yourself feeling like, I don't really want to hurt such and such feelings, so you do that so often that you actually never say what needs to be said. And as a result, you don't change your behavior to do the things that would help you feel less, overwhelmed or would feel way more productive because you don't want to step on anybody's toes. You don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So if these are thoughts that keep coming up, or if these are feelings that you've had, this feeling of hurting people's feelings or not wanting to step on people's toes or feeling, overwhelmed or feeling like you're always saying yes to other people and no to yourself and you don't want to say no to other people, then this may be a really good indicator that you need boundaries. And so what I found is that when I work with clients, when we talk about boundaries, because it always comes up, when we talk about boundaries, people have some very strong things that they desire or don't desire. So you may be that person too. I'm pretty sure if you made it this far in this video and in life, you already know I got boundaries. You might say to yourself, like, there are things that I like and don't like. And so that's great. You know what things that you would, like from people, what behavior you would expect from your employees or maybe from people that you contract with or even your clients. Because if you're an entrepreneur or perhaps in your day work, you work with a lot of clients in your business or in the company that you work for. And so there has to be boundaries with those people as well. And so you may say to yourself, like, I have really good boundaries. But again, if you are getting some of those key indicators that I talked about before, this feeling of overwhelm, feeling it's hard to say no, feeling that you're afraid of hurting people's feelings or getting into people pleaser mode, then you may not have been sticking to your boundaries. And this is the big one, is that a lot of people that I work with don't articulate their boundaries, and they might say they have, but I love to challenge people like to ask themselves, but did you really? Like, did you really articulate your boundary? Because sometimes, especially if you've been someone that has been a people pleaser over the time, or that's been something that you've dealt with. I am very socially aware. So many of you may have heard of emotional intelligence. And so when I've done the emotional intelligence assessment, I score very high in the social awareness, social management. I'm really great at reading a room and being able to tap into people individually, which makes me really good at the work that I do as a coach. At the same time, as a business owner and someone, and I have been a business owner, I am now, and working in business, I also have to recognize that because I'm so attuned to people, there are times that I can get so empathic. I have such great empathy for individuals that sometimes I can take that empathy and make what's going on with an individual something that I make for the whole business or for the whole team. And so it's almost like, hey, as a business owner, as a leader, like many of you are, you can't make decisions based on, one kind of like sideload situation or something going on with a person. But there are ways that you can still honor what is going on with a person while doing what is best for the company. And that's where you have to get, creative and really, be 10 toes down on making sure that you're doing what's best for the whole, while also acknowledging that there are going to be some individual gray areas that you can figure out as necessary and you can navigate as necessary. And sometimes that would be the part that would scare me. I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to do this, big thing for our company, or I have to do this big thing for the whole, but I don't want this person to feel like slighted and all of that. And so there had to be some, me having to be a big person and saying, you know what, I'm gonna have to just have a real conversation with this person, because I don't like, and I don't know if y'all feel like this, but I definitely feel like this. I hate when like blanket things are done for a whole team or a whole group just because one person actually needs to have a conversation. But I do believe that it's important for everyone to know what something is, even if it has to be stated, one time because of one situation. But I don't think everybody should be punished with a meeting or things of that nature for one person's, situation. So I think it's important to acknowledge if you have been that person, because I know I have been that person over the years. And if you are, then that must mean that, you get to practice, creating boundaries around, the things that you say you're going to do, in your company and in the way that you lead people. And so when you're thinking about these things, just want to take a look at my notes because I'm like, I want to make sure I don't forget anything. I want you to consider that when we are not saying something about what we need. So I really wanted to point out this part about boundaries, and then we'll jump into some of the things that you can do to create boundaries. But when we are not articulating our boundaries, frustration is created between ourselves and other people, because you want them to do what you want them to do in your head and they are just going to continue doing it, and they might not know why there is this unspoken tension, right, that's happening. And you miss out on the time that you could really have this freedom of enjoying your life. So if this is like with your family, it's hard to enjoy family time when you feel like your boundaries are not being respected, or when you're expecting people to treat you a certain way but you have not done the work to train people how to treat you. Same thing that happens in our business and our leadership at work. Especially if you are a leader of your own business, a lot of times we are starting businesses because it is birthed out of something that we were passionate about, that we were really excited about doing. And you can get into, your whole business life and hate it because you feel like you're being run over by your clients, or you feel like your contractors are not pulling their weight. And so you feel like you're running through contractors all the time. And sometimes we are just not doing the work to articulate expectations, as well as, manage those expectations as we're going, which includes really articulating our boundaries and being very clear about that. And so we can make excuses by saying, and oh my goodness, I've heard this a million times, and I've been this person. So everything I talk about, I definitely have been guilty of. You'll say, oh, I wrote this email, or I put this in the contract, they should know. And it's like, okay, we can should all over ourselves if we keep playing games, by using that as a way of not moving forward. And so I think it's really important that we acknowledge that communication and creating boundaries and really managing expectations as we go along in life with any relationship we're in, if we desire, especially if that relationship is important. So if it's a client, business partnership that we really value, or if it's someone on our team that we value, or when you talk about your life, somebody is in your life that you truly value, you want to take the time to, walk through that journey of managing the expectations. If you don't take the journey, that's going to be it. You're going to be severing relationships all the time if you don't get to some kind of habit of, how am I going to cultivate and manage the journey of managing expectations? Now, I guess, we can go all the way back. Like sometimes we have, the wrong people in our lives, or we don't have the right people on our team, and maybe we have contracted the wrong people. That's a whole nother video. Like when you're talking about really vetting people that you want in your life and all of that. And if you keep attracting people in your life, in your business, or what have you, that are just not like a really good fit, then that is a lot about vetting, just as much as it is about continuing to manage relationships along the way. And I could do a whole nother video on that if you all are interested about how do you make sure you have the right people in your spaces at work, or if you're a business owner, making sure you have the right people on your team. We can definitely talk about that as well, because that's a lot of fun to talk about. But as it relates to boundaries, it is a long-term game. It's a marathon, right? Especially when you have the right people. If it's someone that you really value on your team, you want to take that journey. And so one way that you can start creating boundaries is thinking about the things that I talked about, right? So once you've gotten some of those triggers, I hate to use the word trigger sometimes, but I said it out of, because that's what came up, but cues, whatever. But once you get those things on your mind about a certain person or a situation, so for instance, for me, I noticed that when I was working full time, what kept happening is that I found myself always traveling. And I've talked about this a lot. One of my full-time jobs over the last 5 years, I was traveling all the time and I truly enjoyed it. I enjoyed it until I just felt like it was too much. And so, because it felt like it was a lot, I remember talking to a coworker just saying, like, oh my goodness, I'm so overwhelmed. I keep getting asked to go here, here, there, and everywhere. And I loved that my coworker, not only did she allow me to event, but she also held me accountable to what I needed to do on my side, on my part. And she said, well, you could like not take as many jobs. You could say you don't want to go to those places as much. And when she said it, it was almost like light bulb. I could actually articulate what I desire to do more of and what I desire to do less of. But the fact of the matter is, again, what was coming up, which is actually a clear indicator that boundaries were needed, which is why I'm telling you that. One of the biggest indicators was that I was scared to say something because I didn't want to not hurt people's feelings, but I didn't want to look like I wasn't a team player. I didn't want to look like I was a slacker. So what did I do? I overworked. I worked way more than the average bear. I was doing all the things. Every time someone asked me to do something, I almost found this gratitude or just some endorphins, right? Dopamine, whatever the things that feel good, all the things, right? They all feel good. Endorphins, dopamine. I was feeling that every time I was being asked to do something, but on that back end, it's like I didn't really count the cost of my yes. Write that down because that's good. We don't always count the cost of what our yes means. And so I would say yes, yes, yes before even thinking because it was that short term, I am satisfying what someone desires from me. And that felt good to be able to do something for someone. But the cost of the yes was me going to bed super late and having to wake up super early or traveling late at night and having to work somewhere with less than 5 hours of sleep and having to go from one side of the country to the next within 2 days time and all the things. And so with that being said, I had to create a boundary. And so I decided on my own, and this is what I want you to do. If you kind of feel those feelings that we talked about earlier in this video, and if you haven't, just rewind. But if you feel those feelings of the overwhelm and all the things that like something new needs to happen, something needs to shift, and it's usually frustration or overwhelm or irritation, what is it with? Is it with how someone is saying something? Is it with something that you continuously get to experience and you're like, I don't want to keep experiencing that? And so for me, it was like I kept experiencing feeling tired, frustrated from travel all the time, and I started feeling overwhelmed, like I couldn't juggle my personal life and this work life at the pace that I was traveling at. And so because I had hit that wall and it almost turned into bitterness. I was almost in this place of being bitter with something I actually love. And it did take me stopping and talking to a coworker to be able to really reveal to myself, like, oh, this is really an issue. You've been kind of like burying this by going on with life like everything is good, but just not stopping myself. And I've talked about this in other videos. Giving yourself a moment to really just stop yourself. Stop yourself and ask yourself, like, okay, I've been feeling this, this, and this. What is the reason that I'm feeling this way? Like, what is the real reason why this is happening? So get that initial question of what is this feeling coming from, right? And then ask yourself why. And ask yourself a couple of layers. There's an activity that some of you may have heard of called the 5 whys. You ask yourself why and answer the question. Then you'll ask yourself why you put that answer down. And you just keep answering that until you get to the root of it. And so I basically did something very similar. So I knew the issue was I'm traveling all the time. Why is that bothering me? Well, it's bothering me because I really desire to be more stable at home. I missed my routines and I really wanted to be back in routine. Why? Because when I'm in routine, I feel my body feels healthier. I'm getting the sleep that I want. I'm intact with all of my key relationships in my life. I get to attend to the other things that I enjoy. Why is that important? Because I want my life to be filled with not just the things that I enjoy doing from a work perspective, but all the things that I enjoy doing in my personal life. Why is that important? Because we live one life and I want to have a fulfilling life. And so this is important. So you see how the whys just get down to the get down. It gets down to the nitty gritty. And so it helped me be like, okay, so it's important for me to do something about that. So basically, I had to think about, okay, in terms of what's in my control, what could I do to lessen being out in the streets, being out traveling all the time. And how could I do it in a way that was still not only beneficial to my life, but still benefited my job, benefited what the company needed. And so that's where that brainstorming came in. And that might be for you. Okay, whatever decision you need to come up with after you get down to that why, that root, how is what you're going to do going to be a benefit to you? Like, how is your boundary going to benefit you? And how can you make that boundary also be something that benefits the other person or the other organization? And I think that's really important, especially when you're talking about talking to your manager, because in that regard, it's not like you own the company. When you own the company, so when you're an entrepreneur, you can just say, hey, you know what? This is a new rule. This is what I'm doing. It's going to benefit you all because you're going to get a CEO that is more clearly, in the space, not overwhelmed, can have real meetings with you all and not be all over the place. Like, you can find ways to make it benefit for your company when you benefit it. You're going to have to do a lot more digging, especially if you're new to an organization. But if you had a relationship, a good one, with your organization that you're currently at, you got to figure out how you are creating boundaries for yourself and your work life balance and how that's going to make sense for the company as well. And here's the part that can make boundaries a little is that you actually have to be willing to walk away sometimes if a boundary isn't met. And so I have a great example of that. I was working at a job that I loved. I actually really, really love this job. And there was a point where I had to make a decision about leaving because there was no upward mobility, and had the conversation with my current boss, and they weren't able to do anything to help me feel like there was some way that I could grow. It was a very small company, so there wasn't a way that I can grow monetarily. So they weren't willing to give extra dollars to give me some buffering in terms of growing in the way that I would desire it at the timing that I desired it. And there wasn't like another title or something that I could have had that made me feel like I was growing. And so I ultimately decided to leave the organization, and I didn't live in a bitter way and slam the door and say anything that was slanderous about the organization. But because I had to figure out a way for me to be able to live in a way that I can be proud of my boundaries and enjoy my life versus staying somewhere and eventually becoming bitter because I wasn't getting what I actually needed. And a lot of times we do that. We undermine the things that we actually desire because we feel like, this is the only way to do things. And there's going to be nothing better than what I already have. And so we just kind of settle for it. And then that turns into resentment when we aren't real about what we need. And so it's so important that you do this exercise of asking yourself, what is causing this frustration and such with, whether it's a relationship or experience that you're having in your life, in your company, or in your business, really asking yourself that, but then asking yourself, okay, well, what is it? And why am I feeling like this? And why do I want this new thing? And why is that important? Being able to ask yourself what is happening and why is it happening, and asking yourself what you actually desire that will benefit you and benefit the company and why it's important to do that is going to be so helpful for you. So once you get that down, so going back to my example when I was cutting down on the amount I was traveling, and I decided, this is the plan that's going to work best for me. So I articulated something to my coworker just to kind of get some feedback, and came up with, something that felt really good that I could share with my boss. And you know what? I shared it with my boss, and they totally resonated. They totally understood. And I was able to establish the new boundary that I desired for the way I did work. And it worked out really well in terms of my work life balance for the meantime. And then, as time goes on, I reevaluated and had to do a few more things to continuously see what I needed to be in balance and also make sure it was something that was beneficial to the company as well, until I decided to ultimately, not be full time anymore and be someone that is a contractor with them. And so as a result, all the decisions I made was a part of me feeling that there were frustrations, things that were making me feel overwhelmed. And when I got to the root of it, it just wasn't aligned to what I needed. And so I had to say something. And so I want you to not only just create these boundaries, like, okay, I'm not going to stay at work past 5 o'clock. I do not no longer want to have meetings on Fridays. And these are the reasons why, or if it's, someone that you're in a relationship with, maybe you have someone in your life and they bring a lot of, negative conversation or negative situations in your life, and you don't want to cut them off, but you need to medium that time that you spend with them. Maybe you need to have a real come to Jesus moment, like a real conversation with them about, hey, you know what? This is something that I want to talk to you about, because I know that we have a really great, I really need to be able to, have less time on the phone because I'm focused on this. And so just thinking about what is it that we need to have more of in our life, and what do we need to articulate so that we can get that more. Oh no, it looks like I'm frozen. I'm like, can you all see me? I see the time moving, so I feel so, this is so weird because I feel the time moving, but I'm not moving on the screen. So hopefully you all have still heard me, even though I look like I'm frozen in front of myself. But I will close this up. So when you think about how to create those boundaries, make sure you get to the root. Like, what is the root that you need to get to so that you know what boundary you need to create? Take some time and think about, well, what is the thing that I need to articulate? Who do I need to tell it to? Like, is it a person? Is it a group of people that I need to share this with? And how do you want to articulate it? Do you need to articulate it, at a meeting? Is it something that is better that it's written and then you follow up with a meeting in order to say it? And being able to consistently think about, well, when is it going to be some accountability or some check-ins when you do have the boundary? And I think that's the part that usually gets missing, is that we create a boundary and then we just let it go and we hope everybody figures it out. But there does need to be some consistency. And I think too, the more you can emotionally help people connect to the boundary, the more as a human being that they're willing to actually, move forward with the boundary because they can connect to it. So, especially if you're going to address a group or even an individual, make sure you're getting feedback, asking them if there's other expectations they have of you, if there are boundaries that they desire to have as well, because you really are you're really wanting to see some, equity in your team, especially when it's your business or it's your team of people at work. And even in relationships, right? It's like, hey, I don't want to be the only one saying what I need. Is there anything you need from me? Right? Because I want us to both be content. So I hope this video was helpful to you. I hope that you were able to start thinking about what are some areas that I could not just create boundaries, but articulate those boundaries and make some great spaces for those boundary conversations to happen. So you can stop being annoyed and frustrated and not enjoying the business that you created or this new position that you're in or the relationships in your life or being at home or in whatever positions you are personally, that you need to create some boundaries, because at the end of the day we want to have contentment in all areas of life. And we know that because life is set up the way it is, there's not always going to be great things happening, but we can manage ourselves during the highs and lows of life. And the best way to do that is to be proactive. How can I be proactive about my environment and how I create it? Well, you know what? I can at least say what I want at the very least. And what is going to be the best for me, and hopefully something that can also benefit others. So I hope this was really helpful to you. If you like these videos, please give it a thumbs up. Feel free to write something in the comments. We'd love to know what other things you want to hear about, as I've been doing a lot more YouTube videos as of recently because I have a lot more time and this is fun for me. So I love being able to kind of be that coach on LinkedIn and do not LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a lot though, so feel free to follow me there. But on YouTube, doing some videos, so feel free to let me know. And if you're interested, I do have a class coming up. I have a class coming up in a couple weeks. So if you are a woman entrepreneur or leader that really wants to do a lot of this deep work in terms of shifting your identity so that you can be that person that has an elevated way of thinking about themselves and walking through life as a leader and entrepreneur, would really love to walk you through that. And if you're interested, feel free to go to my website, DesireeCocroft.com, and click on courses. And this course will be starting very soon. So you are a woman leader or entrepreneur looking to shift who they are into that biggest version of yourself. I would love to work with you. So feel free to check me out on my website. And so until then, until the next time, look forward to talking to you all soon. Bye.